What's up, my peeps? Welcome back to my channel. Thank you for being here. So as you may have noticed from the title, today's video is actually going to be another serial killer / makeup video. I got such a big response in my last video that I wanted to do another one. Again, like I mentioned in my last video, this isn't to glorify serial killers or their actions. I'm just here to inform. Just so you know, I do talk about a lot of sensitive things, and this might have a lot of triggering content. So if this is not the video for you, I totally understand. But for those who want to hear this story, welcome. I'm excited to share this with you. It was actually really hard choosing a serial killer because there's so many. Like, there's so many serial killers, and it's so hard to choose because they're all kind of interesting. So yeah, it was really hard for me to choose. But the reason I chose this serial killer in particular was because it literally like hits close to home. And what I mean is that he resided in Riverside County, which I live in San Bernardino, so it's really close. It's only like a 15-minute drive. And I never knew that Riverside County had a serial killer. Of course, this was a very long time ago, but I still didn't know. He actually committed the murders in Miraloma, which back then I guess it wasn't called Miraloma, it was called Wineville. So the serial killer I'm going to be discussing today, his name is Gordon Stewart Northcott. He was born on November 9th, 1906. Yeah, this was a long time ago. I know we're already primed. He was born in Canada, so he wasn't a California native. Like, he moved to California. He killed 4 children, 4 young boys. I'm gonna go ahead and get started with his early life. Before Stewart was born, he had a older brother, and he passed away from pneumonia. His mom became very depressed, and she was very saddened with the loss of her son. So that caused her to fall into a depression while she was pregnant with Stewart. His name is Gordon Stewart, but I'm gonna refer to him as Stewart just because, like, that's how I mainly heard him, like, his name. With all the research I've been doing, they just called him Stewart, so I'm just gonna go ahead and call him Stewart. His mother didn't want him because she was so depressed about losing her son. So she really didn't want him, even though she was already pregnant. She tried every home remedy for abortion with no success. And it's said by the family members that she was very, like, irritable at that time. Like, everything would get her mad, and she was, like, kind of hostile towards everybody in the house. Everybody kind of, like, tried to stay away. Her and her husband had an abusive relationship as well. She was kind of authoritarian towards him. Like, he would also do things to take out, like, his anger on her. It said that he even kicked her in the stomach, not because he was mad, and, like, they would get physical with each other, and he kicked her in the stomach. And I think she hoped that was gonna be like, oh yeah, he, like, ended my pregnancy as well. But no, nothing came of avail, obviously, because he was born. So when Stewart was born, his mom didn't really show him any love. She kind of just, like, fed him and make sure he was, like, okay, like, no harm came to him. But she wasn't really affectionate. She actually, like, didn't really care about him. But then out of nowhere, like, from one day to another, she just, like, became obsessed with him and, like coddled him, and, like, you know, like, her attitude towards him completely changed, and nobody knows why. She just, like, from one day to another, it went from, like, her not really caring about her son to completely, like, infatuated with him. And that's how he lived his life. He lived his life being spoiled. He was, from everything I've, like, listened to and I've read, it was that he was, like, spoiled rotten, not just by his mom, but by his sister. And then his dad was a little bit more strict on him, but every time his dad told him no or anything like that, there was, like, mom, like, right there and then waiting to, like, you know, fix it. So he was very spoiled. So, like, not a lot is said about his, like, younger childhood, besides that he was, like, very spoiled and he got everything he wanted, and he would throw tantrums and things like that. That's pretty much all they said about his younger childhood. It was rumored that his mom would, like, dress him in girls' clothes, but I think that was later debunked. So yeah, there isn't a lot about his early childhood. There's more info on his teen life and adult life. Although he was a little spoiled brat, he was actually like very charming and very talkative. Like, he was really easy to talk to. He was really easy to like get along with. The only thing was that he was like very flamboyant. So the way he dressed, the way he talked, the way he behaved, he was very flamboyant. And for that time, that was like considered really, really like odd. As right now, I mean, we wouldn't really bat an eye, but back then, yeah, like people saw him as like, this kid is weird. And honestly, he didn't care. He didn't care what people thought about him. He actually liked the attention. Was either if it was positive or negative attention, he just like ate it up. Again, because he's used to being the center of like everything, of like his parents' like life. So for him to get attention outside of his home was even better for him. So let's go ahead and move on to his teen life. As he grew up, again, he always wanted things to go his way. And even as a teenager, he would throw tantrums. And, you know, and that's the only way he really knew how to get what he wanted. Although his killings weren't until his later life, he did display some pedophilic behavior in his late teens. So he bought a convertible and he would offer rides to little kids, like 10-year-olds, in his convertible, because, you know, it's a cool car. And he would also like drive around with a dog or with candy just to lure kids in. No reports were made of any abuse, but like, why else would you want to be hanging around 10-year-olds? You know, suspicious, you know. But like I said, no reports. And it might have been just because of the times, you know. Either the kids were scared to report it, or they just didn't understand what was going on that they needed to report. So he never got in trouble for it. And that's a pattern I see in a lot of serial killers, that usually they like tiptoe their way into things. And when they see they don't get in trouble for one thing, they don't get in trouble for another thing. And then it just kind of escalates until they actually like, you know, get caught, basically. So in August 1924, Stewart and his family moved from Canada to California, LA to be exact. Stewart was 18 at the time, and they all moved here because his dad needed a job. So there are more job opportunities here, so that's why I say here, because I live in California. Stewart was very excited to move because it was a new town, and, you know, like, also new opportunities for him. Although it's still back in the day, his flamboyant attitude was a little bit more accepted. Not like, you know, completely, but it was less like out of the ordinary. Because, I mean, it's LA. So they moved to LA, and, you know, he quickly adjusted. He made his first friend, which was Claude Scott, and he would spend a lot of time in their home. And since he was so charismatic, the family didn't think much of it. But Stewart had alternative reasons why he was spending so much time. Stewart began to abuse Claude's younger brother, Philip. They call him Philly. So that's the reason why he got so close to the family, because if he gets close to them, then they trust him, and then he can be alone with Philip. And it's unfortunate that he had to go through this. Honestly, Stewart saw this as a relationship. He didn't see him as abusing a child. He saw it as a relationship. So he started kind of like getting a lot of feeling towards Philip. So eventually he is caught by Philip's parents, and they like call the police. So on July 25th, 1995, Stewart was arrested for statutory rape. But here's the kicker. Case never went to court. And they don't really know what happened. They don't know if the charges were dropped or if he just took a plea deal. And that could have been of one of two reasons. it could have been one, that the city of LA didn't want like this to get out, the fact that like they had a pedophile, or the family decided to drop the charges to protect Philly. So it could have been one or the other. I totally understand where the parents are coming from, especially during that time. You know, like, your child being molested, it's a very serious crime, but I think they didn't want to draw more attention to their son, because then, you know, people didn't understand this back then. So I mean, whatever it was, this showed Stewart that he can do things and get away with them, which is not okay. You know, after that happened, obviously, like, the family didn't want anything to do with him. So Stewart went into depression. He was like heartbroken because he can't see Philly anymore. So then he decided to get this job. He used to work at a Ralph's, and the manager said that he took a special interest in a young boy that would come in, and this young boy is actually the reason why this case became so famous. Stewart killed a boy by the name of Walt, and the reason why this kill in particular made the case so famous was because of his mom. So we'll get to Walt's story in a bit, but I just want to tell you guys this part. So yes, he did kill him, but the reason why this became such a big case was because his mom fought tooth and nail to have the police look for her son, because they weren't paying any attention to her. Like, they were just like, oh, like, they didn't really care that her son was missing. They were gaslighting her. They were just like, they were being so insensitive to his mom, and she was just trying to find his son. And the police department just tried to brush it off, but she was persistent. Like, she went to the newspaper. She did everything she could to find her son. Unfortunately, she never did. I don't know if you guys ever seen the movie Changeling. It's actually based on the serial killer and her. It focuses more on the story of Walt and her struggles to try to get the police department to help her find him. But in any case, it's a really, really good movie, and I really, really recommend it. It's really good. It's with Angelina Jolie. It's sad. I cried at the end of that movie. During the movie, I cried through all of it. But it's a really, really good movie. I definitely think you guys should check it out. While he was still living in the city, a neighbor actually saw Stewart soliciting young boys for sex. Again, kids, I know it's hard to believe, but kids who are runaways, or, you know, or don't have, like, you know, the ones that are, like, don't have a home or money, like, they do solicit their body for sex because that's the only option that they feel they have. So yeah, even back then, kids would solicit for sex because, you know, sometimes they didn't have parents, you know, things like that, or they were runaways. So a known sex worker was seen with Stewart. The neighbor came out after saying that he saw Stewart with this alleged sex worker, but he said he didn't come forward because it was like none of his business. And at that time, like, nobody would have came forward, even if it was a child. And that was because being gay was illegal. And I'm sure the man or the neighbor, whoever it was, did not want to get involved, because then that would mean getting the police involved, and then the whole stereotypical gay thing might come back. I don't know. People were just scared. So there was no reports, which is so sad, because, I mean, geez. I feel like if we would have reported it, maybe that could have taught Stewart, like, a lesson that he can't get away with these things, and, you know, like, maybe stop him from killing, or maybe he would have gone to jail. Maybe he would have never ever had the opportunity to kill these young boys. But he was never reported. Like I said, he was a very charismatic guy. He was easy to talk to, and he started talking to this doctor, right? Dr. Tracy. He would go visit him, like, very often, and would ask him, like, really, like, weird medical questions, like how long does it take a body to decompose, what happens to a body's like organs when it dies. Very morbid questions. And the doctor didn't really see like anything wrong with it. He just kind of thought that Stewart was interested in medicine, so he didn't really question it. Stewart would come and ask him all these like random questions, and the doctor happily answered them. He really didn't see anything wrong with them. And then one day, Stewart came up to him and he's like, hey, like, how would you, get rid of a body? And the doctor's like, well, that's kind of weird, but whatever. He's like, well, I'm not an expert, but I hear that you can pour lye over it and that helps the decomposing process. And after that question was answered, Stewart never went back to the doctor. He just he got everything he needed, basically. I always wonder, like, did the doctor, like, realize, like, oh man, I just gave him, like, a playbook? But anyways, yeah, after that visit, I mean, he stopped seeing the doctor. So Stewart, being the spoiled brat that he is, he asked his parents if they can buy him some land because he wanted to start a chicken farm. Yeah, flamboyant, never wants to get dirty. Stewart wanted to open a chicken farm. But his parents, being his parents, said yes. And they bought him some land. His dad helped him construct a cottage and chicken coop and like a garage for him to have his own little farm. Well, again, his parents didn't even question him. They were like, whatever my son wants, he'll get. So Stewart realized that having a chicken farm was going to be a lot of work. He actually had to tend to these chickens. So what he decided was to pay a visit to his sister in Canada. And he convinced her sister to let him take her son. And he told her, like, hey, can I take your son? He's going to help me on my farm and make, like, basically like a man out of him. He's going to learn discipline. I'll enroll him in school. Like, he'll do everything he does here, but just like he'll have a little bit more responsibility there on the farm. And his sister, spoiling her brother like always, said yeah. But her son, his name was Sanford, didn't want to go. He was like begging his mom, I do not want to go with him. And the reason for this is because Sanford never felt comfortable with his uncle. He said that he always looked at him funny and that he was always standing way too close to him. And he just didn't want to go. But I mean, he didn't really have a choice. I mean, his mom was basically forcing him. So he ends up going with his uncle. And he wasn't scared yet, but he just did, like, he had like a bad feeling. But there was nothing at that point that he can do. Sanford stayed there. Stewart began to abuse him, but not sexually yet. He began to not feed him, beat him, make him do all the chores from the farm. And he never enrolled him into school. Like, his life was basically being this guy's slave. Right? Then one night, Stewart tells Sanford, hey, like, I've been sleeping in the room this whole time. Why don't you take the room tonight? And Sanford was like, what the heck? Like, that's not like him to, one, give up his room, and two, be kind to him. And Sanford was like, no, it's okay. I'll just keep sleeping on the couch. Like, it's not a big deal. And Stewart insisted. And obviously, Sanford is terrified of him. So he's like, okay, I'm going to take, I guess I have no choice but to sleep in his bed. And Stewart told him, don't worry, I'm going to be in the living room playing on the piano, like, for most of the night. So yeah, like, don't worry about me. So in the middle of the night, Stewart climbs into bed with Sanford. And that's when the sexual abuse begins. He said if it wasn't an everyday occurrence, it was every other day. where his uncle used to abuse him. And again, he couldn't really do anything. The neighbors were miles away. He had no family that was around. The town was like at least half an hour away. Like, he had no help at all. So he really did feel helpless. And his uncle convinced him that it was his fault as well. He told him, like, you can leave, but who's gonna believe you? He's like, if anything, they're gonna blame you and you're gonna go to jail because what you're doing is wrong. Like, we're both gay, basically. You know, saying, like, we're both in this, so they're not gonna believe that I was doing this to you. They're gonna think you partook in it. So that really did scare him. And I mean, saying that to a child, of course it's gonna scare him. So one, who is he gonna tell? And two, that would probably scare anybody. So the abuse continued. But I mean, you know, he would sometimes leave him alone. But Sanford knew that if he wasn't there abusing him, he was out somewhere abusing another child, unfortunately. And he kind of felt guilty about it because he knew the pain that he was going through, and he couldn't bear to think that another child was going through the same thing. And I don't know, that shows a lot about his character. And I feel like he was like he was actually like a very good person, you know. And it's unfortunate that he had to go through it. One day this family went out for a walk with their son. It was the Thompsons, and it wasn't strange for them for Junior to wander off a couple of feet away from them. You know, I think a lot of people had a lot of trust in their community, so I felt like him being kind of away from his parents, you know, while they're out on a walk, wasn't like out of the ordinary. So he runs into Stewart, and Stewart starts talking to him again. Charming guy. But then he asks Junior, hey, do you want me to tickle you? Creepo. And Junior kind of like, no thanks, like, I'm gonna go back to my parents. So then as Stewart sees that he's like losing him, he's like, hey, I have a dog in my car, do you want to come see it? And the young boy is like, yeah, I want to see their dog. And that's like the oldest trick in the book. And but I mean, it was so long ago that maybe he invented that like, you know, that line, like, oh, come see my dog, because he knew it was gonna work. Junior went with Stewart, and right when they were gonna get to his car, Stewart grabbed him and tried to force him into his car. Junior managed to wiggle out and run away to his parents. At that moment, Junior's dad saw what was happening, and he ran over and chased Stewart away with a penknife. Again, it's unfortunate that Stewart got away, because maybe if he would have gotten caught at this instant, he would have not attempted to kidnap any more children. So on February 1st, 1928, Stewart returned back to the chicken farm very happy and like very energetic. And to Sanford, that was like odd, because anything that made Stewart happy was never a good thing. So Stewart calls over Sanford. He's like, hey, come here, I want to show you something. And he has a pail in his hand, right? And he shows Sanford, and Sanford doesn't really know what it is. It kind of looks like a dead animal, but he wasn't really too sure. And then he kind of focused a little bit more, and he realized it was a head of a boy. And he yelled and he threw up and he was mortified, and Stewart just laughed. Like, he laughed the fact that he couldn't handle looking at a head. And, you know, he basically asked him, like, what the heck? Like, what is this? What's wrong with you? And Stewart told him, this kid, he was attacking me, so I had to defend myself. So I shot him and I decapitated him. The rest of his body is in my trunk if you want to see it. And he's like, no, I do not want to see it. So then the next thing that Stewart made him do was make a fire. He was gonna burn the kid's head. So they made the fire, they put the head in there, and once it was charred, they smashed up all the bones into dust, basically. Then, to have an alibi, they drove to LA to spend some days with Stewart's family. On the way there, they actually dumped the body on the side of the road. So as soon as they get to LA, Stewart confesses everything to his mom. And at this moment, Sanford's like, oh my God, thank God he told, because now my grandma and grandpa are gonna help me. They're gonna get me out of his grasp and they're gonna go to the police. But nope. So what his mom ended up doing, she was more concerned for Stewart for having to go through this trauma of having to kill a boy for his own safety. And Sanford was shocked. He's like, how can you say that? Like, this is like crazy. And he didn't really understand what was going on, but it made him realize that he was truly alone. If he wasn't alone before, at this point, no one can help him. His parents decided to cover for him and all that good stuff. Reasoning Stewart gave for cutting the boy's head off was because it was going to be harder to identify a body without a head. And he was right. The boy was never identified, but it's suspected that the boy was from either a migrant worker or from a migrant working family. And it's unfortunate to hear that, because this did happen a lot, where either people who were migrant workers would not go to the police for any reason because they were afraid of being deported. That was his first official kill of this young boy who was never identified. I know the green looks a little splotchy, but in person it really does look blended, just so you guys know. Green is so hard to work with, especially on camera, because it always looks super splotchy, but I swear it's blended. Anyways, let's continue. On March 10th, 1928, Stewart abducted Walter Collins. And like I mentioned before, this is a case that brought a lot of attention to this serial killer. And that was because of his mom. His mom fought so hard to get the police to even look for her son. And like I mentioned before, like, she was gaslit into thinking that she was crazy, that he ran away and all this other stuff. And actually, because of this case, missing children actually are taken seriously now, because she fought so hard that now the police has no other choice but to take it seriously. So, I mean, it did help, but unfortunately, she did lose her son. They don't know if Walter left with Stewart willingly or if it was forcefully. And this is because Walter might have recognized Stewart from the grocery store. Remember, he showed a special interest in Walter, and he might have spoken to him like a couple times, and it might have been that he just like recognized him, and he probably told him, hey, you want to come for a ride, or you want to come see my dog, or you know what, any of those tricks that he would do. And you know, Stewart being familiar, Walter might have been a little bit more lenient to leave with him. Again, it's just speculation. They don't really know. Just the fact that they have seen each other previously, you know, gives all these different scenarios. Stewart took him back to the chicken farm and put him in the hen house and sexually abused him. Sexually and physically abused him. Sanford felt really, really guilty, because these kids, he knew exactly what these kids were going through, but he couldn't do anything to help them. Like, he couldn't even help himself. So he felt like, how am I supposed to help these kids? And in later interviews, he says he feels very guilty for what happened to these kids. So he kept him there for a couple of days. So Stewart's mom came to visit, right? Good old Lois. Sanford was excited to see her, because now she's gonna see, like, okay, this is not in self-defense. This is not in like any way like okay. Like, she's gonna put a stop to it and she's gonna take me away. Walter wasn't dead yet. He was still locked in the hen house. So she was walking towards there. She ends up going inside and she sees the horror. So then she drags them both in and she's all like, I can't believe you're doing this. I thought you would have grown out of liking little boys. Like, can't you see, like, what you're doing is wrong? And that's when Sanford knew, like, she has been knowing he's a pedophile for a long time. And they still let him take Sanford. Like, that's freaking sick. Like, I'm pretty sure Sanford was horrified at that moment. Stewart says, okay, mom, like, let me fix him. Let me fix this. I'll take him back to his family and I'll never, ever, ever do this again. And then his mom's like, no, we're not going to do that. This kid knows too much. So she said that they were going to kill them between all three of them. So nothing can be brought back on to Stewart. Good old mom trying to save her dear old son. So she made all three of them kill him, including Sanford. And it's speculated that she made Sanford do it as well, because that was a way to keep him quiet, because that implicates him. If he says that they killed somebody, then it's his fault too. So they thought that was going to be like their insurance. You know, that's the way that he wasn't going to tell. So then when Walter was asleep, they go into the hen house and Stewart delivers the first blow. And then Sanford. And then the killing blow is delivered by Stewart's mom. Then, after that was done, Stewart and his mom went inside the house and they left Sanford to dig a grave and put Walter in it. Yep, all by himself. Imagine, he's 15 and they're making him bury a body that they just killed. So on May 16th, 1928, Nelson and Lewis, two brothers, were walking home from a boys' club. And they were abducted. And all Sanford could think was, here we go again. Here we go again. Like, I cannot keep doing this. And he wanted to help the boys. But Stewart never left them alone. Ever. Even though he was in charge of them, like, you know, feeding them and like changing out their buckets and things like that, he never left them alone. And even if they could hatch a plan, it was very risky. It was very risky because Sanford was scared. He kept them alive for like about a week and a half, where he sexually abused them and physically abused them. He made the boys write letters home saying that they ran away, and they ran away to Mexico. He knew it wasn't gonna work, but I mean, it at least distracted the police for a little while. So then after a week and a half, Stewart made Sanford help kill the boys, and you know, the same routine as they did with Walt. Kill them and then bury their bodies. What Sanford recalls was that the boys weren't completely dead when he started shoveling dirt into the graves. That he wasn't dead yet. They weren't dead yet, but I mean, he had no choice. After the two boys, Stewart got a little bit more bold, and he started volunteering at the Salvation Army. And he met a family that was in desperate need. He offered them to stay at the chicken coop, and the family agreed because I mean they didn't know. Stewart brought the family to the farm just for them to check it out, right? And Stewart told Sanford and Lois, like, hey, I'm gonna do this, I need your help. And his mom was a little bit hesitant, but she agreed. And Sanford's like, no, like, this is too risky. Like, let's not do this because it's way too risky. That day, Stewart beat Sanford for speaking against him. But at the end, Stewart decided to not harm the family. And the thing is that Stewart was a sadist. He got pleasure from torturing people. From people who would beg for their lives. And I think he not gotten bored with children, but I feel like he felt like nothing was gonna catch up to him and he needed like a bigger high. So I think that's why he tried to take the family. But again, Sanford talked him out of it. Sanford didn't want to talk them out of it because they're like, this is really risky, and if they get caught, then I'm free. But then he felt guilty because he's like, I can't let this family go through this torture. So that's why he spoke up, because he couldn't kill anymore and he didn't want to take any part of this. One day, Sanford's sister Jessie came to visit him at the farm just to check up on him, just because like in his letters, like she seemed very he seemed like he wasn't okay. So she came to visit him. Obviously it's a surprise to their uncle, like, oh shoot, she's here. Obviously Sanford was really happy and excited, and just, you know, he was so happy his sister was there. One, like, you know, like he hadn't seen his sister in like years, and then two, his uncle couldn't hurt him, but he was also concerned because he might hurt her. So he pretended everything was okay. His uncle did not leave them alone, not even for 2 seconds. He actually took them sightseeing and just like kind of kept them distracted, wouldn't like let them talk to each other alone. One night, his sister snuck into his room and they talked. And he told her everything from the killings, even his partake in it, everything. And his sister was shocked, one, and two, she knew she had to get her brother out of there. The only thing is that she didn't have enough money to get him out of there. So she decided to call her grandpa out of a whim, which is Stewart's dad. And she told him everything, and he told her, okay, I'm gonna help you. Buy the tickets to the ferry to go back to Canada, and I will get him out of the ranch and onto the bus so he can meet you at the docks. So that was the plan, right? So in order to not tip Stewart off, she left a couple days early, and she was like, okay, well, it was nice seeing you, you know, try to play it off. And his grandpa actually did come to get him. He pulled up and he took Sanford. But as they were driving down, Stewart caught on and found them. So even though like his grandpa should just kept driving, but he didn't. Stewart took Sanford back to the farm. And honestly, Sanford thought, this is it. He's gonna kill me. There's no way around it. He's gonna kill me. His sister, obviously she was waiting at the docks. His brother never arrived. She had no other option. She didn't have any more money, so she had no other option but to go home. She went home. When she got home, she went straight to the consulate and told them everything. The consulate reached out to the US and they started an investigation. Stewart knew that as soon as she got back to Canada, she was gonna tell on them. So then Stewart started packing everything up. Sanford didn't know if Stewart was gonna take him, but he slowly realized as he was packing the car that there was no room for Sanford. So Sanford was terrified. He thought that his uncle was gonna kill him, you know, but fortunately he didn't. Stewart fled and abandoned Sanford at the ranch. A couple days later, 2 officers went to the ranch after everything that Sanford's sister had told Canadian police. They went to go check it out, and the place was deserted. There was nobody there. They decided to check the chicken coop, and Sanford was there. Barely breathing. He was starving. And they finally saved him. Yeah. He left him there to die. But the police found him. So then they took him to a hospital. A couple of days later, he was well enough to tell them everything that has happened. On September 19th, Stewart was arrested. And on January 2nd, 1929, his trial started. He acted as his own attorney. So he didn't have an attorney. He was his own attorney. And, you know, he tried his best to talk his way out of it. When his mom was in the stand, in her last efforts to protect Stewart, she confessed to killing Walter. And this makes me happy. She was sentenced to life in prison for killing him. But that doesn't mean she saved Stewart. She just got her well-deserved. After the trial, Stewart was found guilty of first-degree murder, and he was sentenced to hang. There was hardly any deliberation. It was like, he is gonna hang. On October 2nd, 1930, Stewart was hung, and Sanford was made a ward of the state. He was sent to a reformatory school to help him deal with his trauma. After that, he was sent back to Canada to his family. Sanford lived a normal life after that. He married, and he didn't have any children of his own, but he did adopt. It was said that he adopted because he was afraid to pass on his uncle's evil gene, and that's why he adopted. He never told his sons about the incident until one day he decided just to tell them everything, and his family was very supportive. His son actually wrote a book, which I haven't read, but it's definitely going to be on my list now. It's called Road Out of Hell. It just sounds really, really interesting just to see everything from Sanford's point of view. So I finished my look right when I was finishing the story, which is hardly ever happens. All right, guys, that was Gordon Stewart Northcott, the Wineville chicken coop murderer. He did murder 4 kids and probably abused of many, many more, including his own nephew. Again, this story got so much controversy that Wineville had to change his name to Mariloma. Yeah, they couldn't handle the publicity, so they had to change their name because of this man who terrorized these children. But a lot of lessons were learned through this serial killer. Again, a lot of kids that go missing weren't being investigated. So this kind of opened up the door to police taking more action when children do go missing. Very sad, but at the end of the day, he did get what he deserved. He was eventually hung and found guilty of all murders. His mother was actually found guilty of 1 murder, and she was sentenced to life in prison. Well deserved, because this lady could have stopped him, but she didn't. She made that choice not to stop it. You guys, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments, and yeah, we'll see you guys next time. Bye.